Greetings. Hope you are doing well. My name is Stephen Paul Byer, and I'm with my friend and brother, Salman Sheikh.
Greetings, my brother, and greetings and peace to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Tonight, we have the honor and privilege of being joined by my brother Stephen Bayer from Chicago, who's back for part 3 in the series of dialogues and conversations. And part 3, brother Steve, is going to talk about why military recruitment should be banned from schools and talk about the aspects of the military-industrial complex. Please, my brother, greetings to you, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for this opportunity. So something that matters a lot to me is protection of youth. I think this is a divine mandate that many people have. Unfortunately, I think our system is kind of designed to take advantage of young people and rush them into decisions that they may not be fully ready to make. One of the most common ways that I see this problem is the enormous amount of propaganda that is in youth programming. I think we may have seen G.I. Joe and other cartoons. These have actually been updated more since the War on Terror. Like you can see in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, the Transformers movie, and I think the new G.I. Joe movie, Snake Eyes, also shows elements of like not just military recruitment, but specifically for proxy war. Like the idea of this is an international peacekeeping force that's interacting in this covert way. But when we look at what this covert proxy war has actually done, it's not how the media and our leaders like to portray it. We like to portray this idea that we're finding the real heroes and the freedom fighters, and we're going to protect these people's self-determinism. And I suppose when and where that happens, that can be a good thing, but in many cases, it's extremely problematic. So the two cases that I would show as when it doesn't go right would be the Kurds and the Hmong. So the Hmong were a people from Cambodia next to Vietnam that were recruited as an anti-communist militia to fight Marxism. And obviously, the United States' policy, was not fully victorious, therefore. So a lot of these people ended up as refugees. In Kurdistan also, when we started fighting this Syrian civil war, we wanted to portray this as a good thing. If you look at Syria right now, it's hard to be happy about how proxy war has turned out. And we get a lot of these cartoons, children programming, and in some cases, comic book movies designed to try to make this type of conflict of asymmetrical warfare seem like we're fighting for the underdogs. But in actuality, I would say that handing out machine guns and rocket launchers to people causes a lot more problems than it can solve. Like really what we're interested in often is, cheaper labor and not having to train and invest in transporting people. But casualties that we don't have to report to the American public are a big part of this. So the style of proxy war really took off in the conflict with the Islamic State. There was a lot of signs that America couldn't find the liberal Democrat, secular, pro-democracy forces in great numbers that we were looking for. So we ended up basically anyone who was anti-government, we might want to give weapons to. There's lots of evidence that our weapons ended up in the hands of groups that we now call terrorists. So That being part of the end game, I want to focus on making it so that people who want to rescue, who want to help, don't get sucked in to this problematic situation that is not really helping bring freedom. It's not bringing peace. It's prolonging conflict, creating refugee crises that are, well, when it's not a nation that's fighting a war, there's nobody responsible for international law. Things often turn to ethnic cleansing and holy war, where lots of civilians will get caught up in the trouble. One of the details about how this works is there was the No Child Left Behind program that was part of Bush's school program. One of the things that I think is very disturbing about this program is that it's linked to allowing military recruiters in the high school. So if a high school actually wants to say that, you know what, we think that there's some manipulation here, we're not sure that we want this promoted, they're at risk for losing federal funding. And a lot of these schools really depend on it. Some of the stuff that we've noticed here, there's a military base down the street from where I live, so it's not very far for me to go. What we've found out is they have historically preferred to recruit from low-income areas a lot of the time. And there's something I think a little bit worrisome about sending poor people off to war when they're young, and particularly with the education that we have here in Illinois and in Chicago, it's based off like the money your school gets comes from your local property taxes. Now, this has changed a little bit with a deal Chicago made with the state, but there's still this essentially rich areas. So I grew up, my grandparents had a house in an area that eventually would develop to be sort of a nexus of the surrounding towns. My family has since lost this house and were evicted. But for a while, I lived in a nice area. I was able to go to a nice school. I had a much better funded education than a lot of the people around here. The difference in Lyons Township compared to the surrounding areas is extreme. Now, I was lucky because I have some special needs from some neurological problems that can give me a learning disability, make it difficult for me to say and talk exactly how I want to. And it's very lucky for me that I was able to get this special help. And it gave me a love of learning, gave me a love of books, where I love to study. But I find it very worrisome because a lot of these people in the poor areas do not have access to some of the resources that I have. And even with my more expensive education, there was a lot that was not taught us. I was shocked when I learned about Hawaii not being a state. I was in college when I learned that when Hawaii wasn't a state when it was attacked at Pearl Harbor, that it was officially occupied territory. The more I learned about how we annexed Hawaii, the more there was a total difference from how it was presented to me than the reality. And I guess I have to take, it turns out I had an ancestor who was partially responsible. There was a president by the name of Grover Cleveland who had an illegitimate daughter named Ruth, who I am related to. And he was friends with the Queen of Hawaii when she was overthrown. And from the historical record, this was done without even his full knowledge and awareness. There was a clandestine nature of how we took Hawaii. And essentially, he was against it, but got over it. Essentially, the president got told that, nope, we're keeping it. And he changed his position. It's an amazing, like the more research I have done on this, it really changed a lot of my perception of colonialism when I realized that, vitamin C in pineapple was enough reason to conquer a people and put them on plantations. It's this pattern also went to other areas. We did similar things in Guatemala. I think there it was bananas, not pineapple, but United Fruit and Dole Pineapple both were very connected to these acquiring of territories, where corporations essentially were petitioning parts of government to take over areas and give them territory. And I don't think any American is comfortable with Guatemala, that situation. When the more they know about the coup in Guatemala and how that happened, it does not reflect how Americans see themselves. We've been given a very false opinion about how these things work. And there's a whole bunch of countries in South America where this pattern repeats. I think the most recent and egregious example would be Bolivia, where we essentially tried to overthrow the government and put in some people who considered native religion to be demonic and satanic, and did not look at the real spiritual heritage of the Bolivian people, which should not be marginalized. It's just a real misuse of Christianity to try to invalidate natives. Unfortunately, it's something that when we can't find secular people to do our business, the business still needs to get done, and we'll apparently hire people with very odd religious interpretations that almost nobody seems to agree with here. Like, nobody really wants to say, we think Native Americans are the sons of the devil and worship Satan, but we found allies that that did that, and we gave them money. And this type of stuff has to be kept from the public. Like, when the public looks at, the more the truth came out of the Bolivia, the more it became impossible for people to support this. We need this false image of us as the good guys. We want to feel good. We think of ourselves as the heroes. G.I. Joe, a real American hero, fighting to save the day. But it often seems like we're not fighting Cobra. We're not fighting a ruthless revolutionary terrorist group. We're the ones who are creating the terrorists, and sometimes even using them as proxies. Sometimes we just create a situation where they can go nuts so that we can solve the problem with the action we want to do. So some of the issues that we've gotten involved with military recruitment locally as it applies to schools, some of the successes and some of the challenges we ran into. The greatest success is when you get the local teachers union to take a stand. I would say that most teachers prefer to be non-political a lot of the time and don't want the issue, but many of them in their heart are very wary about what's going on. And when the military recruiters go too far and actually do something that's identifiably against the rules, the teachers union is like the first line of defense to bring that attention. So one of the things happened in one of the schools. I was doing a delivery there, and I was bringing food, and I was really amazed at what I saw, because the way this was, it was very different from when I was in high school, which was before 9/11. So before that changeover, the military recruiters came in, they had pamphlets, basically you had to go up to the table and ask about the pamphlets. It was, if you didn't want that information, there wasn't much they could do. The thing that I noticed that was very strange was that what was going on at Proviso was the military recruiters were having lunch with students and kind of being their friends and their buddies, providing sort of this workout encouragement during the lunch period. Some of this I would characterize as fraternization, and other people, after I raised that alarm bell, it did get changed. Proviso is much more strict on. They do still allow the military recruitment, but they are not allowing unsupervised youth to have their lunch eating with military recruiting people and having this essentially fraternization between military recruiters and the students. It actually turns out we also uncovered there's a huge tendency for grooming to like there's a disturbing amount of romantic relationships that have happened between recruiters and the people they recruit. And the military has a history of downplaying it and turning a blind eye to it. We have found long lists of people who are complaining about harassment, complaining about manipulative practices involving kind of a romance scam with their recruiter. And the military has a tendency to, while there is documentation of this, it does not make news. Like this is something that is, it's very easy to keep this from the public because I think the public really wants to support the military. We want to view, our neighbors and brothers who are part of the service. We know that many of them have good hearts, want to be good people, but the problems, we can't allow problems to exist just because we have friends and neighbors who are involved in this. So some of the more egregious situations have become public, but there's still a lot of information about youth being recruited into the military who have allegations of abuse that's kept private. So there's some stuff there that we don't know, and we're always hoping to get more people to come forward with that information. Some of the things that have to, of how cover-ups work with the military and illegal orders. One of the people I knew who went into the military, and this person, he didn't need to be recruited. He wanted to be in the military. Like everything he was doing at Boy Scouts was preparation for when he would be in the military. He wanted to be a Green Beret. He didn't end up making that. He ended up being an engineer. The situation was, though, he ended up being around Fallujah during the conflict there. And the orders he was given essentially was, well, we already warned all the civilians to leave. So you can be sure if someone is still in Fallujah at this time, they are a terrorist, and the orders were to clear them out. He admitted and reported that he fired on fleeing women and children, and claims, he didn't know they were women and children, but this type of situation where everyone is declared a terrorist and you don't have to know your target is not within the rules of law. That's technically an illegal order. And the military essentially has covered the incident up in Fallujah. They are saying that anybody who reported these abuses has post-traumatic issues and can get free therapy. So people who have blown the whistle on some of the problems are ignored and marginalized. And I know, I know him. He was very competitive. But this wasn't somebody who wanted to, this wasn't somebody who would ever want to hurt a child, wouldn't want to kill a mother in front of their child. This horrified him. This was not like he trusted that, okay, I guess everyone there is a terrorist. When you think about an urban situation, like the orders were ridiculous. It obviously, like, if anybody had stopped and thought, it's like obviously not all the civilians are going to be able to get out of a city and just run into the desert because you want to have a battle. Like that's not how. Like the terrain in Iraq made that just absolutely a ridiculous claim. But that's still the story as we have it. We have the situation in Abu Ghraib where there was abusive practices with jail. The military covered it up until they couldn't cover it up. Seems to be a common situation. Some of the other ways and things that I've noticed, I had another person I knew, friend who went into the military. He worked as a mechanic, didn't really get involved in too many combat situations, but he ended up getting cancer. Most of his unit ended up getting cancer. And the military was going to let him die in Germany. The military had misdiagnosed his health problems until the cancer had gotten so far there was nothing they could do. And rather than have him die with his family, they were going to let him die in the military base in Germany. It was cheaper. Luckily, we were able to petition our congressman to get that fixed. The idea that we had to do this so that he could come home. I got to see him, but so.
Please take your time.
I know that I know he would be very proud of his daughter if he was around to see her today.
You know, I want to please take a moment, and I want to add to this where I would like to add where even Dick Cheney said one time in this documentary that's out there called The Dark Side of Al Ghura, saying that we must go to the dark side. And there's so many abuses that have been reported, war crimes in Afghanistan, in Iraq, Syria, and so many atrocities that are committed. Most people do not even know that the chaplain's handbook used in the U.S. military is written by a Satanist, Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino, who's no longer alive, thankfully. But the aspect of him writing that book, the chaplain's handbook, meaning if a satanic chaplain shows up, the chaplains of the other faiths, whether they're Islamic, Jewish, or Christian, have to step aside. And the satanic chaplain has more power over all of them because that's who the chaplain's handbook was written by. So you're dealing with basically Satan's crusaders. You don't have any rights. You don't have any rights in this country. You're always being watched. You're always being spied upon. There are wars being fought for drugs, oil, resources, like you pointed out, that they were able to colonize a country over a piece of fruit. So the opium coming from Afghanistan, the oil from Iraq, even though they lost all the wars, they still made money off of it. They made money off of the heroin, opium. So many people I know here in my local Philadelphia area that died of an opium overdose. Somebody at least knows somebody. That's how spread out it was. Where did it come from? It came from Afghanistan. So these people who are in charge, I call them the military industrial criminal complex instead of the military industrial complex, because that's who they are. They're exploiting people on both sides. The people here get them to join the military. They use them and abuse them and throw them away. They abuse the women, these women getting raped and killed on bases. The ones that go over there, they end up committing war crimes, and the ones who speak out against it, like Pat Tillman, they frag them in the back, friendly fire, who think that they're fighting for patriotism. like that gentleman you pointed out who had this real desire to serve his country, then they find out it's a bunch of lies. It's all about making money for people at the top, for drugs, oil, natural resources. And at the end, they just tell you it's for your freedom and appreciate them as your heroes. And those are all lies. What freedom? What heroes? Killing
Huh.
women,
We have
children?
our freedom-loving hero, Oliver North. Oh, never mind. What I mean by bringing him up is there's an interesting aspect of the drug situation. Oliver North, it kind of went uh, kind of the triangular trade from weapons with Iran, cocaine was the center of the Iran-Contras scandal. Essentially, we let the Contras deal cocaine to make that trade. So what does that tell us about the opium in Afghanistan and how it might have been used? If the same pattern was used, what we can expect is that America would probably want to use clandestine networks in Russia and China and use that increase the opium trade to Russia and China, try to get people they could recruit for spy wars, proxy warfare. This is something that opium production was very, very low in Afghanistan when we invaded. The Taliban, for all of the things you can criticize them for, didn't want to have Afghanistan be an opium state at that time. And we actually seem to have, during our occupation, opium production skyrocketed. And we pretend that we were fighting opium. But what we do know about this is there was a guy from here, Chicago. I think his name was David Coleman Headley, was a DEA informant who was involved with the Mumbai terror attack. Many of those terror attacks in the Mumbai event were, at least the official story is that many of them were on an extreme amount of drugs. Cocaine and opium were supposedly used to numb them for combat and get them into ready to die situation. The DEA seems to have been I can't say there are some unknowns, but what we do know is that David Coleman was involved with the government and was closely connected to the people that were linked to that attack. From what we saw in the previous Iran-Contra scandal, we have a big history of attempting to use drugs to create usable proxies that we can disavow. So when I was a kid, there was Bush and he had Manuel Noriega. There was the evidence is that, he was working with the CIA to run drugs during the Cold War. After the Cold War ended, the CIA didn't really need it the same way. So they were going to get rid of him. And I'm not a huge fan of Manuel Noriega, but it is interesting how just even on paper, he was kept in jail secret. And, the way that he was prosecuted was to keep him silent so that the truth could not come out. And there is a horrible dark side where we use drugs and other things to create covert assets for war. And often these drugs end up coming to America. So the Contras, a lot of that cocaine came to the inner city. And this allowed the militarization of police. There is the cycle of one step and then the next step. There's a domino. And essentially we were sending money to Iran for weapons, and funding that with the cocaine trade. And when the crime shows up in the inner city, let's have more money for the police state. So the militarization of the police brutality are connected to these secret proxy wars. And we cannot admit certainly to the kids and certainly not to the parents of the kids, what we're actually fighting about half the time. We need caricatures and boogeymen to go fight. Many of these people, I sometimes make the joke about Don Quixote. They're all fighting a windmill. They're like, yeah, you went to Iraq to give women the right to vote. Like, even saying that makes me laugh because,
Ridiculous.
but for a while, that lie, that like people were able to believe that for a while. Like, we were there for weapons of mass destruction. Okay, that isn't the case. Well, what are we here for? Well, we're here to make sure women get educated and women have the right to vote.
Yes, just an extension to you get the support of the people so the imperial empire can continue its hegemony. Please continue.
We have a tendency to try to pretend that we're helping someone who's marginalized, but then we leave them, and similar to the situation with the Hmong or more recently the Kurds, they're, on every measurable way, they're worse off than, we brought democracy to Syria, and that was a great success. Oh, never mind.
See, that's the thing, my brother. These the military industrial criminal complex, that's what I call them, are getting $750+ billion of U.S. taxpayers' money, and they're losing every single war that they've been in. Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan. They just suffered a global humiliation with the foreign policy that this big bad army got defeated by a bunch of farmers and goat herders. Why is that? Because their resolve is in God. You were there to create death and destruction and to fill your own pockets. So the karma, I'm not taking any sides here, but the karma does play itself out. And look at it this way, my brother. If those $750 billion was used to help all underfunded school districts in America, social programs, and help the youth, that's what they're saying, right? We want to help the women and children.
Desperate. The thing that's really sad here is, if we were to try to make our lives better for Americans with that money, I guess I'm going to cut to a shortcut here, is that sometimes you see that people who are pro-life don't actually seem to care about preventing abortion. I would suggest that military recruitment and having more of a market is part of the motivation for why we see, like, for instance, Hitler was pro-life and banned abortion. I think it's clear that his motivation was not protecting life, it was recruiting soldiers. That's why he promoted motherhood. Going to go out on a limb and suggest that. And I'm not saying that people who care about the unborn are necessarily bad. I think it's a great thing to care about mothers, but the way that you prevent abortion is by giving people an opportunity to improve their lives so that they want to have a family. You don't prevent abortion by punishing people and restricting them and making them more desperate. Often we look at that desperation as, well, as I said, the military likes to recruit from poor, desperate areas. In actuality, when I was bringing up protesting military recruitment in high schools, one of the areas that was most concerned about it, as in they didn't want to go along with it, was actually the African American schools in Austin, because a lot of them viewed the military as the only way out of the ghetto.
Yes.
The places that were more comfortable with it were the more well-to-do suburban areas that were predominantly white. Had more okay with saying, yeah, maybe we don't want people manipulated into the military too young. We want to give them a chance to get educated. But people who are really desperate and poor, the chance to have a career, have a job that's respected, that has benefits, and to be able to, be the good guy. If you got the choice between gangs and the military looks like it's more responsible than some of these gangs that we have around here. I would actually suggest that an awful lot of the gangs that we have in Chicago are used with the police state, the confidential informant system
yes.
of Chicago. allows them to use gangs as a carrot and the stick, and it allows them to assassinate people with their own, like a gangster becomes confidential informant. If he doesn't do what he's told, he can be arrested.
You know, it's
And
interesting. Please hold that thought because there was back in 2016, I believe. Yeah, 2015, 2016 timeframe. My local area that I'm in now, my record is clean as a whistle. I haven't even gotten a parking ticket. That's how clean my record is. And there were you because at that time there was a lot of Islamophobia going around, and the local police chief, who's no longer in charge of this area, I knew for sure that he was racist. He was Islamophobic, and he was using the local drug dealers of the area as CIs to spy on the Muslim community. So everywhere I would go, I would see this guy popping up, and I'm like, what is going on? He's the one committing the crime. Why are they spying on us or trying to set us up as patsies? So you please continue.
yes, I think you said that better than I may have, but this is a pattern that it affects an enormous amount of things. Is that the police are not catching these people because they've already been caught, and they that allows sort of a blackmail system where now you work for the police, but the police, by letting them be a problem, by having this problem here, can get more funding. So, but they never will solve this problem. So some of the ways this can manifest, um, it's not just uh, it's just not the gangs. They also try this in the white supremacist movement, and you will see an awful lot of time Ku Klux Klan groups are actually co-opted by the police. And this is a very bizarre thing where the government, instead of solving the problem, is using boogeymen to create more of a problem. And the one of the examples that I find very strange here in Illinois is there's this guy who runs as a candidate, and he denies the Holocaust and has the most ridiculous set of beliefs that, like, obviously dysfunctional. In my opinion, this is a manifestation of the bipartisan combine of Illinois,
Mm.
which dates back to essentially the Republicans and Democrats trade seats and sometimes run fake candidates. There are certain ones where the Democrat's supposed to be a star. So he's able to, like, that candidate isn't supposed to win. He's not a legitimate candidate. He's supposed to lose. And both parties, at least here in Illinois, seem to be involved in this. It definitely permeated state politics. It got kind of exposed, but it was called the bipartisan combine. And I would suggest a similar pattern, maybe not at the corruption level we have at Illinois, but a similar pattern of trading and having candidates that are supposed to be dysfunctional so that other people can win also exists at the larger federal level, and is why we have a very dysfunctional political system. So
Mhm.
Barack Obama, who was our Illinois senator, he used to work for Business International. He wrote about that in his book. What he didn't mention in his book, but can be easily found out, is that Business International Corporation was a CIA front company that produced fake news. After he worked at Business International Corporation, he came here to Chicago to be a community organizer during Operation Chaos, which was when the CIA was illegally spying on Americans, protesters, and setting up community organizations. So there's something very uh, problematic where we have our heroes and our villains co-opted and creating our next generation of leaders. And it seems almost like a musical chairs, and it's not really a mystery at that point why we have what's continuity of policy. And that is whether you vote Republican or you vote Democrat, we're still going to support Israel. We're still going to support the power in Egypt that's not particularly democratic. We're going to essentially the same basic stuff. We're going to have proxy war in Ukraine and Georgia to confront the Russians, Republican or Democrat, the same basic thing. And it makes me think of my ancestor, President Grover Cleveland, who his own statements seem to be that he did not know that parts of his own government were taking over Hawaii, that it was classified enough that he didn't seem to be on board with that. Like the very president was, they didn't need to go to him. The corporations, Dole Pineapple, had decided they wanted those pineapple plantations. And once the corporation and the military had planned it out, there wasn't much need to go to the president. The same thing seems to have happened during Oliver North's and Poindexter's proxy war situations. Is leadership, the Joint Chief of Staffs don't need the president to know about this stuff.
Yes.
Like the civilian government does not need to know the military's business unless it needs to know the military's business. And considering some of the scandals at the Pentagon with child pornography and them not being able to find the people who had the child pornography.
Oh, these people at the top, they're all hardcore Satanists and pedophiles, no doubt about that.
Well, in my opinion, when one looks at American Satanism, it's very strange. It's sort of set up as an informant group where it becomes like right now we have a couple of different supposedly atheistic satanic groups. And so they claim that it's sort of a parody thing they do just to mock religion and mock people of faith. And that basically they're just secular people who are using it as a mascot. You know what? There are problems with how people of faith sometimes operate politically. So I can understand people wanting to lampoon and mock certain policies of big church when it gets involved in government. I don't want to take away people's views. I think, however, though, it's intentionally polarizing and not supposed to work. Like, why would one raise the banner of Satan if you wanted to create, I mean, it gives an enormous amount of energy to create a satanic panic, which in turn creates more support for the police state, more support for the worst aspects. So there seems to be a good cop, bad cop thing going on with Satanism in America. I'm going to use a different example of a different fringe church, which claims it wasn't satanic, but maybe just as problematic.
Try to see if you can tie this into the military. Like I said, that the chaplain's handbook was written by somebody of that faith.
You need to check this out, or lack of faith.
Yeah,
because it's the actual atheist, like. It turns out that originally the Church of Satan had some theistic elements, but eventually it went completely atheistic and then settled on that. But so the group I wanted to mention was the Westboro Baptist Church. Now, the thing that's interesting about the Westboro Baptist Church is I have a rule I use for propaganda, and that is the system does not give free publicity to anything but itself. I actually came up with that rule by studying the Westboro Baptist Church. So this is an example of the good cop, bad cop use of religion. And it turns out that the Westboro Baptist Church's founder was originally a Democrat civil rights activist. That seems very odd when one thinks about this group that ends up being really flamboyantly anti-military and anti-gay. So this group supposedly is anti-military. The media is giving it a lot of free publicity, and they keep managing to get to the Supreme Court. Well, the Supreme Court actually gets to pick which cases it wants to hear. So if the Westboro Baptist Church, which sometimes they're known as God Hates Fags, it's a they're known for producing parody videos of songs that are just vehemently designed to be upsetting. Like,
even people who are homophobic generally don't want to admit to being this homophobic. Like, this is not how it's, in my opinion, this is a bad cop element where what the Westboro Baptist Church was able to do was make it so that now we can't protest the military at certain situations. Like, their protest of the military was designed to be dysfunctional. So now protesting at certain things is restricted because of laws that were designed to protect us from the Westboro Baptist Church, which seems to actually be an example of this bad cop situation, which is part of the model of why the satanic groups are able to get so much free publicity from the media, so much presence in the courts. Like the currently, I think in our Illinois State House, there's a baby goat hybrid in a manger as a display. Kind of a bizarre system of art. I have to say that I don't fully get where that's going. My understanding is it's supposed to be a mockery of the nativity scene as understood by Christians. And we're supposed to say, oh, well, this is the price of religious freedom. We have to allow this. Well, the thing is this is a parody, and it's a parody the establishment is allowing because it provokes. There aren't that many people that actually, I mean, I suppose there are people who are goth who just sort of like the imagery, but there aren't that many people who actually really want to organize and can create a coherent group around Satan if it's not part of an establishment government media plan. We kind of have that where we're supposed to think of Satan as an atheistic thing. He doesn't really exist. Nothing bad is really going to happen. It's just a joke, but it's supposed to lampoon fundamentalists. And I don't know. I would have to say that the use of religion in this way, which I would call controlled opposition, is extremely manipulative. Another example of these controlled opposition religious groups. This one's actually a theistic Satanist group. It was called Joy of Satan. It had a matching white supremacist group called the National Socialist Movement. Gets an enormous amount of free publicity, sometimes online, or at least it did while it was more active. And essentially, this was one of these examples of a government-run Ku Klux Klan sting operation, where the government was using this controlled opposition group to create problems when it wanted to create problems. And the last thing we really need to do is be creating a forum for satanic Nazis, but that's exactly what seems to have happened there. And why we would do that, how that's the expression of American freedom, just drives me a little bit nuts, because I don't think that's why the average worker who works and what they think they're working to create. I think humans can be described as people who want to build temples, people who want to build communities and want to come together in unity. And when you see people who are creating opposition and division for fun and power, it's a sad state that we are in today. And the reason is this facilitates military recruitment and the creation of the police state. It keeps people divided, and while they're divided, they're more willing to empower the leaders and the same status quo, which continues this proxy war, which creates the refugee crises, and it goes on and on to this. I guess it's gone farther than I ever thought it could. Like, the level of, we're just going to destroy another country and move on to the next one. As a kid, I didn't think we would. I would imagine there would have been an awakening and Americans would have checked themselves. But we keep being presented, I think, with a false issue, so that they're able to select the next group of heroes. So if in actuality, let's say Trump may have been bad cop and we're supposed to think of Biden and Kamala Harris as good cop, but there's still a lot of the same policies that are going on. We're still seeing, Biden has not removed Trump's recognition of the Golan Heights to be annexed by Israel, which is illegal under our own treaties. But we're basically saying that if you want to build there, we'll still give you money and we'll fund it and buy our construction equipment, which is made here in Illinois by Caterpillar Corporation. And by the way, if somebody wants to boycott Caterpillar because of that, then they're going to be in trouble. We'll actually crack down on people who are opposed to giving money to businesses that profit from the occupation. And
I mean, Biden's on record. You could look it up. There's a video of him saying that he's a Zionist.
Well, of course, he's a pro supporter of Israel, and I think pretty much all politicians. I don't know. There's a small group of politicians that are not basically supporting anything Israel does, regardless if it's right or wrong. Mm-hmm. I think some of the critics, though, that actually get in may possibly be controlled opposition. I hope not. I hope they're just trying to find the right way to get a difficult message out. But I think a lot of times the government creates a good guy and a bad guy. So for an example, Donald Trump was a big friend of Vince McMahon and did the whole hair versus hair match. So we know that he's kind of got that reality TV show aspect of creating a fake drama to you see it sometimes with these Keeping Up with the Kardashians or the other ones where there's a fight just for the cameras, where you can tell like that's written.
It's all for the ratings, and Donald is good at that.
I went to one of his speeches after his one got canceled here in Illinois because so many people protested it. Mm-hmm. There was one in Chicago, and so many people showed up to protest it. He wasn't able to do that. So with no sleep, I drove all the way down in the middle of the night to get to his next speech and protest him there. And there was a really horrifying snake story he told that was clearly, we were supposed to think of Muslims as snakes and poisonous and think of ourselves as an old loving lady who took care of a snake until it bit her and she dies. It's a story that's been told many times. Usually it's not specifically designed to think about one group. It's designed to say, hey, be careful about helping someone who might be a predator. But this one was specifically designed to, the way he told the story, we were supposed to be thinking about this as all Muslims. I, being a little bit of a twisted, ironic individual, decided to call this out in an odd way because this was after the coup in Egypt, and all the people who protested the coup had been arrested, and many of them had been sent to death row. Many of those death sentences didn't get carried out, but a large number of people were sentenced to death. So I started yelling out, General Sisi is a snake. General Sisi is a snake, which, in actuality, I kind of regret that because I shouldn't have even jumped on this story. It was so toxic, it was so evil and so sick to even do that. But General Sisi is the guy we're giving money to. Mm-hmm. So Trump quickly had to change that topic. But one of the things that was very strange is there was one man in the audience who was, I have to, I really suspect that there were a couple people, like one person Trump invited on stage and had a shirt that said Latinos and for Trump. I kind of suspect that was a plant that was put in the audience, and Trump knew exactly who he was inviting in on stage, and he didn't just pick a random person and give them the stage. I have to assume that there was a whole bunch of these Trump rallies had people who were planned kind of as a reality TV show. But there was one guy who was apparently of an Islamic background who kind of got up right as I yelled this and sort of looked like, like there was ready to have that whole, is there going to be a Trump event incident? Now, Trump did not want that because the last thing he wanted from this story was it to be twisted to his ally, which not all of his base wants as an ally, which is why I thought it was a tactically interesting thing to do. As I said, I kind of regret it now because this story was completely toxic and sick. And even though I do think of General CC as a snake, and he does kind of fit that description, you never want to give racists even a moment's breath of airtime. And so I have to say, I am sorry to 100% of all Egyptians, and I'll even be apologetic to General Sisi after he steps down and stops his reign of terror. Because whenever one sees something that racist, one should call out the racism. It's completely wrong. It's completely unacceptable. I don't know. I thought it was a little bit clever at the time because it was able to stump Trump in his antics. And watching Trump on video having to react to be yelling kind of, I don't know. I still regret it, even though I enjoyed it. So that's sort of my guilty pleasure right there was, oh, you're going to tell that story? Well, let's look at these horrible people that you're supporting. Who are the people that he considers moderates? I guess people who cut up journalists with bone saws and dump them in the sea might be considered moderates. And the invasion of Yemen, we've supported. The situation there is horrible, and our media had, a large amount of the truth gets downplayed, and we're able to portray, hey, Saudi Arabia has raves now. It's progressive. They're causing a famine and invading people, but like we're supposed to be worried about, gee, is Saudi Arabia becoming too liberal because they're having raves? MBS.
Oh, they're a bunch of criminals, and I, as a Muslim American, I condemn them. They are not the representatives of Islam, and I hope in my lifetime I see their reign come to an end. And that's the thing. I mean, you look at the aspect of 9/11, it was criminal elements of the American government, Saudi government, Israeli government, and they were all in on it together. So why the poor people and innocent people of Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria had to suffer?
Well,
That's the
we have
question.
military bases in Egypt and Saudi Arabia. I think we as America have to take some responsibility for what Saudi Arabia and Egypt do. When I'm criticizing what's going on there, I want to say that this is something that America ultimately is more responsible for than even the people of Saudi Arabia and the people of Egypt. The people of Saudi Arabia and the people of Egypt are victims here, and they are victims of our system that is taking away their power and giving it to predators. We've put a predator class in charge of them. We're training Egypt's Air Force to fly helicopters, F-16s, and other major things that makes it so that there's nothing the people are going to be able to do when they're under that level of occupation. And it's extremely sad when one looks at the system that we have created. I would also say that England's BBC seemed to report the collapse of Tower 7 in advance, still on video. So I'd have to throw at least some aspects of the United Kingdom in on that list, that we're sort of fighting to keep the colonialism of the British Empire's economic system going without the empire, that if we have enough of a debt-based economic system, we can proxy war it to keep it going. And there's a good chance that there will be more disasters, more fake events to create more of a mandate for whatever we want to do next. Nothing's really changed just because we got rid of Donald Trump. A lot of the same people are still in charge. A lot of the system is still in charge, but it's going to be able to repackage itself with diversity. So what I mean by that is the police state and the military, in many ways, are kind of bastions of white power. Not necessarily like the white power caricature we see of, Nazis, but just this is a white Anglo-Saxon dominated power group.
Yes.
And the thing that's very disturbing in my mind is the tokenism that is used to protect the police and protect the military has really accelerated in the last few years. Diversity is a good thing, and I hardly want an all-white police force or an all-white military, but I'm constantly finding these posts where the military and the local police are, hey, look how diverse we are. We've got a picture of a minority person, and they're constantly wanting to use these. Tokenism is essentially when you need to appear more diverse than you actually are. The thing is the reason why we need tokenism is because there's an enormous concentration of white power serving white interests. And so, I know it's difficult for a white person to call out tokenism because essentially they're using a black person as a human shield. And however, because the police state and the military are essentially an element of the white power system, I do feel that it's something that I have to point out that some of our diversity is wishful thinking. I wonder if Barack Obama was chosen to be president because we wanted to do proxy war in Africa, and it would be easier with somebody who wasn't white as our president. It would be easier to take over Egypt, Libya, cause a civil war in Sudan if we were presenting ourselves with more diversity. And I certainly hope Kamala Harris has changed a little bit since when she put nonviolent drug offenders in minority communities behind bars. Her work as a prosecutor makes me think that she may not be the best advocate for the marginalized in the world, but she's a good image for diversity, and that's what America really seems to want. And I hope that maybe Biden has had a change of heart and has learned something, but I'm not going to take, as much as I would like that to be true, I don't think it's that likely. I think that a lot of these people are very set and they constantly are able to, you don't see Biden saying the war in Syria was a disaster. I really regret causing a refugee crisis. I wish we had done things differently and not handed out weapons to machine guns and rocket launchers to terrorists. We're not going to apologize for Syria. We still seem to be thinking, hey, maybe if the right economic problems in Lebanon and Syria combine, we'll get another one a little bit better. And we're still hoping for the same bad result that does not work. And that to me seems to be a definition of insanity. People need to, and when they're humble, I think they can see this. Like when I was more arrogant, when I was younger, I had trouble looking at the military as anything but the good guys. I had trouble looking at the police as anything as the good. I had to learn the hard truths the difficult way because that image of the good guy was, hypnotically placed in my mind. I did not want to think there is a real problem with the police. even as a kid, I actually thought that maybe Oliver North, he was fighting to, I wanted to justify some of this because of how it was. Now I look back at that and it's like, oh my God, I looked at Oliver North and thought that he was fighting the bad guys. This was an enormous amount of people, though, have accepted that. Like Oliver North was looked as a hero, got a job with Fox News doing war. It's just baffling that after he's been pardoned, after he had to plead guilty, he's still seen as a hero. After you managed to get all that cocaine through the Contras sold in the inner city, all that devastation that caused, there's nothing good there. There's nothing to like. The Contras didn't win. Nothing of the 3-part system of that triangular trade. Every single part of it was dysfunctional and bad. No good came out of it, except his Fox News career. I managed to. It is amazingly tragic when people follow image instead of the truth. And I think, so part of my paradigm that I like to think of idolatry, sometimes people think of idolatry as any image or personification of something spiritual or divine. And that can lead to problematic things when one has an associate or one is making an image. To me, however, when I think of idolatry, I think that there's more to it than just the statue. The way I think of idolatry is a mascot. So if you think of how two schools will have a competition, they'll have this thing for their mascot. Imagine city-states can have mascots, and that back in time, like Athens had Athena, that was their mascot. And when they had a war with other ones, it would be Athena versus this god versus that god. That type of aspect where one's thinking of one's god as the incarnation of your political and national ambitions, to me, is one of the real risks of idolatry. When your religion is more about a mascot. I think an enormous amount of American Christianity is on that mascot level. It just can't really admit that, we don't really take Jesus's words seriously. We're not really on a mission of charity, care for the poor, care for the creation of the earth, or any of that. We're more about thinking of the Bible as our book in an us versus them, this is what we cheer for aspect. With this aspect of idolatry, this can be taken to the American flag, the way we think of American exceptionalism, and the way we have a hero worship for our police and military. And we essentially, I think we can even look at this, we can take this and actually show its idolatry because people, not just the satanic aspects of the chaplain corps, but there's an authority taken from people's hearts and minds and just do what you're told. So they no longer are able to spiritually reflect and say what's right or what's wrong. Should I kill everybody who's fleeing Fallujah because I was told that they were terrorists? Or should I stop, think, know that I have a legal obligation, know what my target is before I shoot it, and not shoot a fleeing civilian? That mascot aspect of us versus them, worship of authority, separates us from the divine oneness that calls for us not to divide, that calls for a true unity. So I would say that at the end of the day, the problem is actually shirk. It is actually idolatry. It's creating an association to God. And essentially, people have put the cross and the flag next to each other and worship the flag and the cross. And they don't even care what the cross is supposed to stand for. It's a symbol at this point and has become a mascot. It's us versus you. And we're going to take your stuff. We're going to kill you and take your land. And it doesn't seem to be why Jesus protested the temple and why he was arrested for resisting some aspects of colonialism in his own day when he was with people who were occupied. So the Western Empire loves to be worshipped. Back in the day, there was actual emperor worship, the imperial cult. I think now we've sort of franchised this out, but as long as people are letting their children be recruited into the military, thinking of that as, just doing their job and doing what they're told and it will work out, we're going to have more disasters like Fallujah. And that's what I hope to prevent. And I hope that more people will think seriously about what's going on in their local high school. And particularly now where the polarization of high schools has become an issue, we're going to see the reactionary, whenever the people stand up to the reactionary people, they try to grab more power. So as I protested military recruitment, it actually spawned a group that openly supported racism and military recruitment in schools, and went on to support Trump and get a little bit of national attention. Now seems to be a bit dysfunctional and falling apart with some of their infighting. But the one good thing I would say of that is at least, this guy was the student council president before he, came out as a racist. He may have been able, if he hadn't, thought that I'm going to stand on this youth recruitment to the military and white Christianity means we don't have to care about black people and Muslims standpoint, that the one good thing about that is it has limited his political aspirations. He's now unelectable. Student council president is probably the highest he's ever going to get, other than, spreading memes online now, which I guess, but yeah, that group had same hometown as me, came from the same school I went to. And there's also been the fact the student council president did actually start a racist hate group that was pro-Trump, did at least wake some people up. They haven't managed quite to organize what they want to do about it, but there's a lot of awareness of, wow, that was a problem. How was that right under everybody's nose? This school had an African American, it was when I went there, we had there was some diversity. I think LaGrange is actually a beacon of actual real diversity compared to some of the surrounding towns. And I'm glad that the people who actually came out for racism and military recruitment at the same time, like they actually came up with both and understood, yep, these two things are linked together and that's what we like. The one good thing about that is, once you've seen it, you can't forget it. The people in this town can't just pretend that those people who are our friends, neighbors don't exist. There are these people who actually said, no, we want to support military recruitment in high school because we are racist, because we don't respect black people, because we don't respect women, and because we don't respect Muslims. And they probably would have been, able to be covert and for quite a long time if they didn't choose to organize around that incredibly bad idea. So hopefully, and I think there are some people who support the military just because, as I said, part of it is they want to be the part of a team, have adventure, picture themselves being the good guys. There are good people who end up joining the military, and there are not every mission the military does is bad. overall, though, the spiritual problem in the system has time and time again led to refugee crisis, disaster, and disaster. And it's making some of the most corrupt people in the world rich. All of this money that goes out to contractors, essentially war allows you to transfer money to your buddies. Whether that's Dick Cheney's friends in Halliburton, or Betsy DeVos's brother, who was the head of Blackwater. It's very disturbing in my mind that Trump put the sister of America's top mercenary in charge of our education. They don't have the same last name, but they are siblings. Betsy DeVos and Eric Prince of Blackwater.
All the war criminals stick together.
They're an amazingly rich family, and his wealth comes from being a mercenary, and that aspect particularly, because the proxy war aspect, getting people from the military and into the more covert parts of the war, is the next step, because the military has too much transparency for most of the real atrocities. The CIA and other intelligence agencies, I think the United States has like 17 or so major intelligence agencies at the moment. A lot of the stuff that goes wrong, we never get to hear about. We're not going to see it in the news at all. Even the fake news system will not. So for an example, in 2008, when we, with our CIA trainers, were helping our allies in Georgia attack Abkhazia, CNN covered it up. It took the images of the people we attacked, and when the Russians counterattacked us, we took those images of our victims and said, this is what the Russians have done. That evidence is still out there. We can all view. This is when CNN tried to take American crimes, and I don't want to defend the Russians too much here. Russia has its own problems, but the bottom line is Russia didn't blow up that stuff. That was us. The CIA trainers had convinced the people of Georgia that they were going to win, and it did not work out for Saakashvili. It did not work out for the people of Georgia. And it did not work out for America, because we had really made this deal that we were going to use Georgian troops in Afghanistan. And after the war, we had a huge loss of manpower, but that further needed our need to recruit youth. We are definitely going to keep this up. We've got, Lord knows what the next G.I. Joe movie is going to be, but almost for sure, kid movies will continue to have very strong military recruitment themes. Video games, whether it's Call of Duty or Halo, are going to present the villains. I'm of the opinion that the reason why the Covenant in Halo is a theocracy is because of the War on Terror. That this is sort of a caricature of we're supposed to picture the militarized people fighting religious fanatics as part of our paradigm. I think that this is very twisted, and at the same time, we're supposed to think of the devil as a secular hero. Sometimes this is a very bizarre thing the media presents. The devil as a champion for secularism. And that creates more satanic panic, which ends up empowering some of the most abusive aspects of our police state and military-industrial complex. Well, I thank you for the opportunity to talk on this incredibly unpopular topic.
We needed to have this conversation, my brother, and I thank you for your activism against the military-industrial criminal complex, the aspect of predatory recruiting, and the war crimes, and everything you have shed light on was something that needs to be talked about, because if no one else is going to talk about the truth, it falls to individuals like us, because we owe that responsibility to future generations by providing them the truth. So I thank you for this beautiful part 3 that you have graced us with, and I thank you for everything.